Hello and welcome. I apologize for the late upload this week. I was having some issues with getting things recorded well. I had the video recorded and ready to go and I was previewing and I looked at it and I went, well, that's not right, because it certainly wasn't. The formatting was very much incorrect and it was not viewable in any way, shape, or form. So I get to redo a video. Woo! This week we are going to be talking about gores. Now, for those of you who are not aware, gores are the inserts that are put into clothing, among other things, that take things from a basic rectangular shape and they add these little triangles. If I can get a bit, there we go. The little triangles that widen things at one end and keep the other end the same length. Now, this is one that I put in during the first video that is, not going to be uploaded for various reasons. So I'm going to be adding another gore to this same test piece or sample piece. So before I do anything else, I'm just going to take it, I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm just going to cut it in half so that we have a place to set in the gores. Gores are actually fairly simple. There are two ways to do them. I'm going to show you the way that conserves fabric. You will see a little bit of a difference in the grain or the pattern as it's being put in, and I can show you that after I get this cut. I'm not being very precise because I have no need to be precise here. But if you look closely at the gores themselves, you can see that the fabric that I've used here actually does have a pattern to it. So on this side, the little dots and the scallops are pointing down. On this one, they're pointed up. And that's just because of the way that I actually cut the gores, which is what I'm going to be showing you now. I've went ahead and cut out this piece of fabric to the correct length. And to figure out the length, you take the piece that you will be putting the gore into, you measure along the length that you need, and then you add double whatever your seam allowance is. My seam allowance is 1/4 inch, so I added 1/2 inch. And cut to length. I am sorry about the wiggles. I have a new setup and I'm still getting used to having the cords all over the place. So like this, and then add the 1/2 inch here. That way there's enough for the seam allowance. Now, to actually mark and cut the gores, you figure out the width of what you want the gore to be, or you want that additional width to be at the bottom. And then again, you add your seam allowance. So it's 1/4 inch on either side. So that's 1/2 inch. And then you add another inch, because you will actually be taking from this side and adding 1/2 inch and cutting this direction. So you add 3/4 inch on either side. So you measure the width that you want and add 1.5 inches, and that's the size that you cut this direction. And you find the center of that, and to do that I'm just folding it in half I'm taking the tailor's chalk and just making a little mark right on that fold. It's barely going to show because of how that was done. We've got a little blue mark. You measure out from there a 1/4 inch and make a mark a 1/4 inch either way. So there's your 1/4 inch mark there, and 1/4 inch mark there. So I've got 3 marks. We're going to ignore the center mark from this point forward. These are 3 marks. Huh, I got schmutz on there. Oh well. Schmutz. And then on the other end, you're going to mark a 1/2 inch in from the edge on both sides. So there's a 1/2 inch there. And 1/2 inch on the other side. And from here you take your straight edge, and as usual I'm just using a quilter's straight edge or a quilter's mark, and you connect the outer of the 3 with the mark you just made on the opposite end and just draw a straight line. Which is not going to be very straight because I'm going over all the bumps and noodles on the sewing machine. And you do the same thing to the other side. And that's where you're going to be cutting your gores out. And this is actually a really, really wide gore. It's going to be kind of funny looking, but that's okay. It's going to be very obvious. And then you just cut along those lines. Now the stitching that I'm going to be doing today, I'm going to be running it through the machine. All of the stitching that I'm doing can be done with a simple back stitch or a running stitch. The back stitch is more secure as always, but a running stitch or one of the combination back stitch and running stitches works just fine. So you now have 3 triangles. We have the large triangle and 2 smaller triangles. But if you put these 2 smaller triangles together, they end up the same shape as the large triangle, give or take. Again, I'm not being very precise. I don't really want to be on this one. This is just an example. Now, the thing that you need to remember when you're putting your triangles together is that, and this is very important, it's something that you learn as you go. It's something I had to learn the hard way. When you put them together, make sure that you put the straight edges, the ones that go with the grain of the fabric, together, and that you leave the diagonal edge open on the side. When you sew 2 pieces of fabric together that are both on this diagonal edge, they will stretch and warp and distort. That's just the nature of woven fabric. It's normal. But it's something that a lot of people don't know will happen. So I am warning you now. That is a thing. So we're going to set the large triangle aside. And we're going to set aside one of the pieces of the small triangle. And then we're going to take the main piece that we're working with and one of the sides of the triangle. Now I said that you do not want to put two diagonals together, but putting a diagonal and a straight edge together is fine. That is perfectly standard. That's actually what you should do. So you're going to take your straight edge and flip over the triangle so that the diagonal edge and the straight edge of the fabric line up. You stick it on there and you're going to sew it down. Normally you would pin this. I'm not going to bother with pins because it's so short. And then you sew it together. Again, I'm just running it through the machine real quick. Well, I say real quick, but as quickly as this machine goes. And you got your first piece of the gore done. It doesn't look nice. It doesn't look pretty. It's all sorts of wonky and it looks like it's some weird angle here. We're going to actually be trimming this down and cutting it off. It'll look a lot better when we're done, I promise. So you got that one done. You go to the other side, you take the large triangle and you do the same thing. So you've got your right sides of the fabric together. You put it on there and you stitch it down. So you've got that one together. Now you take the large triangle, you take your other piece of the main thing that you're working on, and you do the same thing. And again, this is not a precision thing that I'm doing. I'm just kind of throwing it together as an example. And then you add your last small triangle to the far edge. Here. Now to put the whole thing together into a tube, which you will need to do, you keep the right side of the fabric up. And you bring the other end together so that it's all right sides together. And match up the edges of the two small triangles. This is why you have an extra 1/4 inch seam allowance on these. So that when you do that 1/4 inch seam allowance and you sew these two together, this gore and the gore on the other side will be the same dimensions. So you line that up and a quick zip through the machine. If I line it up correctly. Ah, my cutting was off. That's okay. seems to be a silly thing, but when you turn it out, so the right side is out, that's what it looks like. You've got that nice triangle shape in there. It is definitely wider at one end than it is at the other. And the thing with the gores, like this one, I left a little bit of extra there. So if you're doing gores underneath like an armpit or something like that, this is an easy way to open up that arm side, what's called the arm side or the armhole, so that you've got extra room. Is to add a few gores, and then instead of putting it so that the point comes together like it does here on the ones that I did originally, you have a little bit of a gap so that it makes it a little bit wider. Now I did say that we were going to be trimming these down so that they look correct. And the easiest way I have found to do that is to fold the gores in half. I'm going to use the one that we stitched together because it's easier. Fold the gores in half, start at the edge, match it up, and kind of do a little bit of a curve. And just trim it down like so. So you've got that nice little curved edge. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be, because normally either you will be hemming this up and you can adjust a little bit as you hem, or it's going to be attached to another piece, in which case you will be stitching away all the minor imperfections anyway. But if you turn this so that it's right side out at this point, and you've got threads everywhere. This is the one of the originals that I did for the video that did not turn out correctly. And that's one that we just set in. So it's nice and widened out. And this, honestly, at this point, if we did a little bit of gather at the top and hemmed it up, this could be a nice little skirt for a doll or something. It's really that simple. And that's how you do a basic gore. The second way to do a gore, so that you don't have to worry about the pattern as much, is to actually, instead of doing the one large triangle and the two smaller triangles, is to measure out the top and the bottom, create a triangle shaped pattern piece essentially, and then lay each pattern piece on the fabric so that the pattern in the fabric is all going in the correct direction, so you don't have some of the patterns upside down or sideways or whatever, and cut each piece out that way. But you would insert them the same way as you did the larger triangle, the single triangle. And that is a basic tutorial on how to do gores. I encourage you to practice, try this for yourself, and see how you do. Let me know how you do. Follow me all over the place. I am on Instagram, Twitter, I'm here, I am on Twitch, all as Scaldsbane. So feel free to give me a follow, reach out if you have any questions, like, comment, subscribe, whatever you decide to do. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.